It seemed to Turner less and less likely that he would be lighting out for the territories anytime soon. But as the days went by and he settled into his imprisonment, he was comforted by one thing. Who knew how, but he was more and more sure that Lizzie had not lied to him, and that Malaga was as real. And there was one other comfort, and it came from a surprising source. After 3 days of his absence, Mrs. Cobb appeared at the parsonage to ask if he had been sick. When she found out he wasn't, she asked if Turner might come to her house to play the organ for her. His mother agreed. Turner was not told how Reverend Buckminster came to agree to this too, and he did not ask. Turner dawdled on his way down to her house each afternoon. Not that there was much to see, but there was the sea breeze and the trees were starting to yellow and blush. So he dawdled until he came to the picket fence, and every day Mrs. Cobb was standing at the door waiting for him, scowling and sour. And she stayed scowling and sour through the first hymn or two, and then she started to hum a little, and eventually, by the Battle Hymn of the Republic, she was singing, "Glory, glory, hallelujah," and her voice trembled and then grew stronger. "Glory, glory, hallelujah, his truth is marching on." And some time after the glory, glory, hallelujahs were over, Turner glanced at her to assess her general state of health, and if she seemed hale and hearty enough, he meandered into, "I have some friends before me gone," and played more loudly than it ought to be played so that Mrs. Hurd could hear it across the street. And when he finished each afternoon, Mrs. Cobb leaned back in her chair and smiled, not a scowl anywhere on her face. "I've made it through another day," she said. "No last words yet," Turner agreed. "You're not such a bad sort after all, Turner Buckminster. I'd be pleased to have you be the one to hear them." And Turner nodded, strangely glad with the honor, though not so eager to fulfill it, and headed on home. He would wave at Mrs. Hurd, who was sometimes rocking on the porch with her shawl around her shoulders, or sometimes sitting by a window watching for him. And he dawdled as the clouds turned their mackerel undersides to him, and the cool of the late afternoon started to settle in over the town. One afternoon, after another dreary Sunday, he walked home from Mrs. Cobb's with a sea breeze determined to shove him to Malaga Island. It scooted around him and pulled at his ears. It threw up the dust of the road into his face to turn him around, and when he leaned into it, he suddenly let go and pushed at him from behind, laughing. But with the iron word forbidden tolling like a heavy bell by his ears, Turner would not let himself be brought to Malaga. And so, with a last abrupt kick, the sea breeze twisted around and left him. Turner watched it rushing pell-mell down Parker Head and toward the shore. "Go find Lizzie," he whispered. And it hurt him. That night, after a quiet and still supper, Turner sat by his window watching the late dusk turn purple, and suddenly there was the sea breeze again, chuckling and rolling down Parker Head, whipping 3 times around First Congregational and then rollicking across the street, up the clapboards of the parsonage, and to him, rustling his hair and scooting down the back of his shirt so that he shivered and laughed.